Have you ever just walked through a forest and thought, man, if these trees could talk? Well, guess what? They kinda can. Every single scar, every bump, every weird twist on a tree's trunk is a clue. It's a chapter in its life story. So today, we're gonna be detectives. We're gonna learn how to read the secret history that's written right there on the bark. Okay, let's just dive right in. Take a look at these pictures. You've got this weird mushroom thing growing on the side, some holes drilled in a perfect line, a big split at the bottom of a trunk. Now, to most of us, that's just, a flawed tree. But to a forester, to a real lumber expert, oh no. Every single one of those is a crucial piece of evidence. It tells them what's happening inside the tree. It really is a puzzle, just waiting for us to solve it. And that's really the big question we're tackling today, isn't it? What can the outside of a tree, its surface, tell us about the quality of the wood that's hidden deep down, way below the bark? I think the answers are going to surprise you. So here's our game plan. First, we're going to decode the tree's secret language. Then we'll talk about this idea of a perfect log, just to have a baseline. After that, we'll investigate all the clues left behind by physical damage. And then the fun stuff, critters and fungi. We'll uncover some secrets hiding just under the bark, and finally, we'll see how this all connects to the furniture in your house. You've got to think of every tree like a living history book. Seriously, the bark is its cover, and all those patterns, they tell you this incredible story. A story about fires, insect attacks, fungal infections, and just the day-to-day struggle of reaching for the sun. And here's what's so important to remember. We're not just pointing out imperfections here. In the world of timber, these clues are actually called grade defects, and they're the key. They let people figure out the quality and the value of the wood inside, all without ever having to cut the tree open. It's pretty amazing. So before we can really start spotting these defects, we need to know what a perfect specimen looks like, right? We need a baseline to measure against. So let's talk about the ideal, the mythical, the theoretically perfect log. Now, what's so wild about this is this perfect log, it doesn't actually exist. Not in the real world, it's a total unicorn. It's this theoretical standard, a butt log, that's the first log from the base, that is perfectly round, perfectly straight, has a tiny little unusable core, and this huge outer ring, the quality zone, of completely flawless wood. So basically, any little thing that's different from this ideal, well, that's a clue for our investigation. All right, so our first batch of clues comes from the physical world. We're talking about scars from fires, damage from logging, or even just the weird way a tree had to grow to get some sunlight. A total classic is the butt scar. You'll see it near the ground, usually shaped like a triangle. It's a dead giveaway that there was a forest fire a long time ago, or maybe some logging equipment bumped into it. But more importantly, it's like an open wound, a giant welcome sign for wood-rotting fungus to get inside and start causing some real damage. Here's another really obvious physical clue, a big fork. When the main trunk just splits into two or more big stems like this, it's a huge problem for lumber. It massively reduces the amount of straight, usable wood you can get. And on top of that, the spot where they join is often a weak point, trapping bark and moisture, which is never a good thing. Some clues are way more subtle. These deep folds at the base, they're called flutes. You see them a lot on trees in swampy spots. Now, the wavy wood itself isn't the problem. The real problem is what gets trapped down in those deep grooves, ingrown bark. And that trapped bark creates a line of weakness that can run straight through a finished piece of wood. Let's move on to the next category of evidence, because trees are not living in a bubble out there. They are constantly dealing with other living things, and all those interactions leave behind some very, very telling clues for us to find.
Oh, this is a big one. If you ever see one of these shelf-like things growing on the side of a tree, it's called a conch, you've found the smoking gun. A conch is just the visible part, like the mushroom, of a fungus that's having a feast on the inside of the tree. It is a dead certain sign that there's a whole lot of rot and decay hidden inside.
So what about these neat, perfect little rows of holes? Well, that's the handiwork of a sapsucker, which is a type of woodpecker. And this damage, they call it bird peck, isn't just on the surface. Each tiny hole is a little wound that lets in staining fungi. And as the tree grows over those holes, they turn into little pockets of bark buried deep, deep inside the wood. And believe me, the list of intruders goes on. You've got burls. Those are those big lumpy growths that actually have beautiful swirly grain inside. Sometimes they're super valuable. Then there are cankers, which are kind of like open sores on the bark from a fungus. And galls. Well, galls are basically tumors on the tree caused by anything from insects to bacteria. Okay, now for the really cool stuff. the expert-level detective work. Some of the biggest, most important defects are the ones the tree has spent decades trying to hide from us. Let's look at the secrets buried just beneath the surface. A tree is an absolute master at healing itself. Year after year, it lays down new layers of wood, and in the process, it just swallows up old branch stubs, insect tunnels, all that bird peck damage we talked about. The evidence doesn't just vanish, it gets buried. And this is where the real experts come in. There's this great line from a U.S. Department of Agriculture handbook that just nails it. It says that even when an old wound is buried super deep, it often leaves an identifiable break in the normal bark pattern right on the surface. A little ripple, a faint swirl. And that's it. That's the aha moment. A real detective doesn't just see bark, they see a topographical map. That little ripple you'd never notice, that could be the only sign of a huge buried knot or an old bug tunnel from 30 years ago, smack in the middle of the most valuable part of the log. So, we've learned how to read all these clues. We've gathered the evidence, but so what? What does it all mean? Well, this brings us to the final and probably most important point. A defect is really in the eye of the beholder. This right here is the biggest takeaway of our whole investigation. A flaw, for one thing, might be totally fine or even desirable and beautiful for something else. It is all about what you're trying to make in the end. Let's just look at this chart to see what I mean. See the row for a large, sound knot? Okay, if you're making high-grade veneer for fancy furniture, that knot is a degrader. It's a complete deal breaker. But for a piece of construction timber, it's often totally fine. Same thing for borer holes. But look at rot, the kind a conch points to. That's a degrader for pretty much everything, because it means the wood is weak. Here's one last example just to lock this in. Picture a massive log, but the center is completely rotten, useless for a structural beam, right? But that outer ring of wood, that quality zone we mentioned, that wood might be perfectly clear and strong. That log could still be turned into some absolutely beautiful, high-value boards for a workshop. So the next time you're out walking, maybe in a park or a forest, take a second and look closer. Don't just see a tree trunk, see a story. Look for that healed-over fire scar, the telltale lines of a sapsucker's lunch break, the subtle ripple that hints at a branch from long ago. What stories are those trees telling you?